Hello, I'm Ernie Humphrey, the CEO and COO of Treasury Careers. Thank you to everyone for taking the time to join us for our webinar today, Leveraging Technology to Own Your Cash Conversion Cycle. I would also like to thank our sponsor, Western Union Business Solutions, whose strong commitment to thought leadership helps us make this webinar possible today. Treasury Technology is now offering companies of all sizes unprecedented visibility into all accounts payable and accounts receivable processes. This visibility offers companies the ability to manage AP and AR in harmony, not in silos, to optimize their cash conversion cycles. Today, you'll discover how companies are leveraging a better understanding of the payables and receivables timing to maximize and create discounts and opportunities, optimize the amount of cash tied up in idle inventory, and maximize cash flows while mitigating currency exposures to impact the bottom line. Before I delve into the content, I'm going to offer a few quick words about Treasury Careers, cover a few housekeeping items, and review our learning objectives, as they are our value proposition to you for investing your valuable time with us today. Treasury Careers, a division of TreasuryJobs.com, we offer content and resources that empower Treasury professionals to own their career success, have a tremendous amount of job opportunities posted, a plethora of Treasury certification resources, complimentary webinars like this one today, and also Treasury best practices. Now on to our exciting housekeeping items. The slides are currently available under the handouts area in your GoToWebinar control panel. We'll also send you links via email to the presentation and the webinar recording, if that all turns out well, over the next 24 to 48 hours. For those of you interested in receiving CTP credit for today's webinar, you'll have to answer all polling questions and remain on for the duration of the webinar. If you have any questions regarding CTP credit, please send me an email to ernie@treasurycareers.com. We'd like to hear from you today, so we can take your questions at any time in the questions area of your GoToWebinar control panel. If we don't get to your questions during the webinar today, we will follow up with you directly to address your questions. Finally, we appreciate your consideration in taking a short survey at the end of the webinar today, as we always strive to improve the ROI we offer our event attendees for their valuable time. Now, our learning objectives. We'd like you to be able to understand how current technology delivers visibility into cash flows and fuels improvement in the forecasting of cash inflows and outflows, be able to identify opportunities to improve visibility relative to AP and AR at your company, and how to better manage AP and AR related to actual and expected exchange rate volatility. So how are we going to accomplish our objectives today? Well, first of all, myself, I'm also thrilled to have with me on the webinar today Ian Goodwin, Senior FX Trader for Western Union Business Solutions. Ian is a 20-year capital markets veteran. He spent his career assisting corporations involved in foreign exchange, fixed income, and commodity markets at some of the world's largest independent FX payment firms, as well as a top 10 investment bank. Ian's primary emphasis has been on assisting corporations design hedging strategies to manage market exposures and settlement logistics as they enter or expand into foreign markets. Ian is a frequent speaker at various economic events and financial symposiums in the US and Canada, and he's known for demystifying complex financial concepts and instruments to make market entry simple and efficient for companies. So I will be pulling Ian into the conversation here, so we will get a tremendous perspective from myself as a senior treasury practitioner at a multinational corporation, and Ian's vast experience as well. So our agenda for today at a real high level, we're going to take a quick brief look at the cash conversion cycle, and then we'll start to delve into how technology is really changing how the accounts payable and receivable functions are taking place at companies of all sizes. So first we'll dive in a little bit to accounts payable. I call that AP 3.0, accounts receivable AR 3.0, and then we'll talk about how to harmonize AP and AR best practices, and then we'll wrap things up with some additional resources and some closing thoughts. So take a quick look at the cash conversion cycle. In Treasury, historically, we've been more focused in the arena of accounts receivable. So from my perspective as a Treasury manager, we would always focus on receiving that cash and those metrics. But over the past few years, what I've seen is technology really develop more in the arena of AP automation. So on the right side of our graph there, so in terms of optimizing how we receive products, process invoices, and also pay for those products as well. So I'm going to start digging in here, begin to examine accounts payable. I'll review some common pain points related to AP and how technology is helping companies of all sizes mitigate pain points, but also unlock the opportunities. And the opportunities are often being uncovered through increased visibility relative to the entire AP process. Then I'll go to the same process regarding accounts receivable. So we'll talk about the benefits to a company to aligning AP and AR to own its own cash conversion cycle. So let's start things off and let's um, take a look at what's going on in the arena of accounts payable. So I'd just like to show this graph in terms of the accounts payable process. Those of you who have never really been in the weeds in terms of accounts payable, this can be a pretty enlightening slide. So there are a lot of people, processes, and systems involved in that accounts payable process. And one of the things that we really focus on when we talk about accounts payable 3.0, it's a little bit more than what historically we would think of as procure to pay. So there's more focus on the front end in terms of onboarding suppliers, the value of those supplier relationships, and really having a collaborative relationships with our suppliers instead of just playing a referee from finance. And then, of course, in the traditional P2P space, we want to look at how do we minimize those invoice processing costs. So we want to look at the people and process and systems there and see how we can lower those hard dollar costs. But also a big piece of that is we have pain points in terms of the time that folks are wasting on non-strategic activities. And then a little bit on the backside, which I sometimes call the last mile of AP excellence, is really on the payments optimization side. So now we're starting to pay more attention on that side. So what about the types of payments that we're making? How are we making those payments? And then the ability to have a better relationship with our suppliers is going to give us some negotiation power in terms of how and when we pay, but also on those discount side. So again, I like to look at things in terms of maybe where you're at, where you want to go, people, process, and technology. So some typical accounts payable points, again, with the historical P2P focus, is how do we minimize the cost of processing that single invoice? So just some interesting metrics, especially if you're not really far along the path of AP automation, just to really shock you a little bit into what these numbers look like. So the first thing is $15.55 to pay a single invoice, and that's a data from Ardent Partners. I've seen that number actually be quite a bit higher. I've seen it $26 for certain industries like the airlines. I've seen that as high as $100. So those of you who are looking at improving the strategic value AP function, one thing that you want to make sure that you have is the ability to have an estimate of how much does it cost to process that invoice. And then you'll see that number's high. And then if you haven't done this, as you map out all the people and processes, you'll start to see the pain points, and then you'll start to see where that cost is coming in, and then you'll start to see how much value that you can get from lowering the cost to pay a single invoice. So some data shows average savings with AP automation, it can be as much as 80%. So if you look at certain companies, if you can lower that cost, maybe it's $10 an invoice, $20 an invoice, the business case for investing in the AP automation kind of makes itself. It's even more costly in terms of a T&E report. You've also got the cost of your folks just creating those reports as well. And then we look at payment types, $9.34 to cut a check. I always ask people to think about this. Go back, if you're not an AP, ask your Treasury team, why is it that you're even cutting checks in today's world? So tremendous cost there. And then a pain point obviously can be, it takes on average 28.9 days from invoice receipt to payment. So that really doesn't give us a lot of flexibility in terms of taking any discounts. And really almost all the time it really makes sense to take that discount if you look at the opportunity cost and not taking a discount. For example, if you are looking at terms of 1 net 1030, that opportunity cost of not taking that discount is over 18%. So unless your cost of borrowing is over 18%, it makes sense for you to take that discount. So not having the ability to pay in a certain number of days, it really impacts your ability to take those discounts. The first step is that visibility, but if you can't process them in time, it really takes away that flexibility in the types of discounts that you can negotiate. Some other pain points, time spent handling supplier calls. Again, some folks are spending as over up to 40% of their time doing so. We'll talk a little bit more about that on the supplier management pain points. But if you really start to dig in and look at how some folks are spending their time, it's really amazing how much time is spent. And part of that is just due to the lack of visibility and some asymmetric information. And then a pain point obviously is costing you money, frequency of late payments. So you have late payments that damages your relationships. It can also cost you penalties as well, but it just damages relationships. And then so if you don't have the visibility or processes in place, you can have duplicate or mistaken payments that can cost you up to 3.5% of the amount on your payables. Huge number. Other pain points, decentralized operation costs, the mail costs. So you just start to see, again, one of the legs of AP automation done right is going to be to minimize those invoice costs. So to take a look at that, you want to be able to, okay, determine what's my cost of my invoice, what's all my cost, people, process, time, and then where are my bottlenecks, where can I make improvements, and then you can really start to put some benefits to it on that side. So we talked about lowering the invoice costs. That would, I would say, is kind of the meat of the P2P, where we historically will have the conversation about AP done right. So let's take a little bit of a deeper dive into supplier management pain points. So again, I don't think historically there's been enough attention paid to optimizing supplier relationships. Probably over the past few years, before maybe the past 6 months or so, we've had a lot of focus on customer relationship management, and I don't think we've had enough focus on supplier relationship management. So I think that is absolutely an important area. And that supplier relationship really starts in the onboarding process, just getting those tax forms, managing that bank account information, just having that asymmetric information. So without the systems and the asymmetric information, what does this cause? This causes collaboration barriers. It can cause untimely communication, and then the technology in general in your processes can just create inherent relationship constraints. And all of these kind of taken together, it causes us to be reactive instead of proactive. We want to be proactive with our suppliers. Again, oftentimes there might be opportunities in terms of discount opportunities and the benefits to those types of programs, but also in terms of potential issues. We really don't want to put suppliers on hold if it's not necessary, so we can start to cut issues off at the pass, make sure that we are aligned in terms of what's owed, when it's owed, and the discount. And so we want to move to the point where we're having the proactive relationship. And we also want to create an environment where it's possible for our finance team and even our CFO to be engaged with our suppliers throughout the relationship process, so the CFO is not getting involved when there's an issue and playing a referee in some sense. So we want to look to be that strategic partner. And in today's world, people are always looking for channels of innovative growth. So when you're looking for channels for innovative growth, sometimes it's the case where you actually go into joint ventures with your suppliers. And when I was back in manufacturing, in my company, our supplier relationships were almost as important as some of our customer relationships. Supplier relationships, very important right now with what's going on with all the hurricane, all the disruptions. So folks that have those good supplier relationships in place, they're going to be able to mitigate the storm and impacts much better than those that aren't paying attention to those supplier relationships. And then on the back side of it, our payments pain points. So if we don't have that visibility, we're losing discounts. We can have ineffective working capital management. One of the things the lack of visibility does is it impacts our ability to effectively forecast cash, and ineffectively forecasting cash can cause problems, especially if you are a net borrower. You don't want to borrow money when you don't need to. You want to invest your funds and get the highest yield possible. And also, as Ian will talk about a little later, if you have foreign currency exposures, it's really going to lead to ineffective currency management and mitigation. And then, of course, not having the flexibility, visibility, negotiating power. You can have costly payments methods, and then having a lot of manual processes involved is going to create cumbersome controls. So before I pivot over to talking about AP automation and the benefits, I want to go ahead and launch our first polling question. First polling question is asking you to share with us where your company is at in terms of the process of AP automation. I appreciate everyone's consideration in answering all of our polling questions. For those of you who are interested in receiving CTP credits for today's webinar, you will have to stay on the line for the entire time and also answer all of our polling questions. Also want to remind you that we can take your questions in the questions area of your GoToWebinar control panel at any time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and leave the polling question up for another few seconds. Then I'm going to go ahead and share the results. Then I'm going to go ahead and give my initial take on the results, and then I'm going to go ahead and ask Ian what his thoughts are here. So I'm going to go ahead and close that polling question, and I'm going to go ahead and share that. So it looks like we've got a good percentage of you that are just starting in that discovery phase, or you don't know. So I think this is a very good opportunity to see what's out there. So a lot of times, especially if you're a treasury or CFO, you might hear a lot of noise and you really don't know the opportunities that are out there. So I think it's really a good fit for today's webinar to hopefully get you more educated in that space. So let me go ahead and bring in Ian here. Ian, what are you seeing in terms of companies in terms of where they're at in AP automation? Are there companies that have international exposures, maybe a little bit farther along, about the same? What are your thoughts?
Well, Ernie, I think one of the things that we're seeing a lot, when we're talking about AP automation, first and foremost, and where we're going with our technology and what we're emphasizing is that we have a common platform, and that platform allows you to receive your invoices, ledger your payables, so you have them all kind of laid out with a nice clean view in front of you. And that's the same application that you can actually process your payments across, whether that be international or whether that be domestic payments. And it also has functionality where you can do peer-to-peer communications, whether within your organization or external to your suppliers, so that all of your communications related to the AP are all done in the same system. So what we'd like to try to eliminate is a lot of the inefficiencies that are involved in looking at one system to see what's due, go into another system to issue the payment, go into maybe email or some other thing to communicate with your vendors that you've issued them the payment. So what we're seeing is just a lot of the companies that we're working with, particularly when their suppliers are in foreign markets where communication is made more difficult due to time zones, that clients are definitely looking at systems that allow them to have that kind of efficiency right across the whole platform and really do this a lot more simply. Certainly, I think people with international payments that have been looking to have better views over their foreign currency exposures, just because of some of the risks that we've seen, particularly over the last little while with the U.S. dollar going through a weaker dollar phase. Obviously, recently a bit of a different story, but a lot of customers were concerned about the fact that idle payments that they needed to make were sitting unpaid, and that was costing them money as well. So certainly customers with foreign exposures have sort of led the charge into this, but it's something that is of appealing to people regardless of whether they have foreign currency exposures or not.
Okay, so now let's take a little deeper dive in terms of AP automation, how it helps us cure these headaches. And so just for some of you that are in the, I don't know if you're in the discovery phase or you're currently evaluating AP automation, but also those of you who might be implementing right now, you want to make sure that you have all these features available and that they're turned on, so you're optimizing your ROI to that investment. You want to look for something that's end-to-end, supports the entire invoice process. You want to look to a system that mitigates data entry and user interaction. You want something that has good integrability with your ERP and other business systems as well. Of course, you want something that is simple user experience and interface. And I think the point that Ian made so eloquently, which I am glad to hear, is it improves relationships with vendors and teamwork. So not only does it add that symmetric visibility with your vendors, it also does that internally, so it helps facilitate your teamwork as you're supporting your suppliers, and then your CFO and CEO, so we can all have that 360 view. And so in terms of having that effective collaboration, so you always have the whole story, where you've been, if you've had challenges, how you overcome them, and then how you put your best foot forward in terms of having a proactive, mutually beneficial relationship. So in terms of some of the key benefits, just to give us a point, maybe some good takeaways here. So some of the key benefits, we talked about some of the struggles. These solutions can give you effective supplier onboarding. We talked about visibility into supplier communications. Again, it's always good to have that full picture, and oftentimes we can see this in real time, which is tremendously helpful. And then visibility just creates things that seem so easy on paper, what's owed and when it's due, and then discount disputes. So those often take up a lot of time, which really takes away from the productivity. And then we can be proactive as opposed to reactive in terms of relationship management. And then, as I mentioned before, some of the visibility, we can see that improved cash forecasting. And then we get visibility into the levels and timing of currency exposures. And we'll talk about this a little later, of how that facilitates the better risk exposure management as well. And then on the backside of the AP automation benefits, the payments optimization, just taking that ownership of those payments methods, and this can be tremendously valuable. If you're in terms of that portfolio, checks, wires, domestic, international, ACH, corporate, commercial cards, checks. Again, I have to say this, you have to ask yourself why. Very costly. They're also very risky. So they're also the most risky payments method. Most recent AFP fraud and control study showed checks are still by far the highest target of fraudsters, I think by over 20%. So another consequence of using checks are the risk exposures. And then you want to look at the methods, wire transfers, domestic, international, ACH, the cost side, but also if you're able to use corporate and commercial credit cards, you might be able to earn some sort of rebates on your payments on that side. Oftentimes, obviously, that takes negotiation with your suppliers. Well, if you have those good relationships with your suppliers, if you're able to pay them, control that timing, that can give you some credibility in order to help transition some of your folks that are used to checks to electronic payments. Some of the AP automation firms are actually very active in helping you in this regard in order to get your suppliers onto that network, and it's benefits all around. And now in today's world, it's a lot easier to share that remittance information. A lot of times when I was in Treasury, the reason I wanted the checks was I wanted the remittance information. Well, now there's ways to do that much more effectively. And you can also, if you're able to switch your suppliers, you can also help them avoid lockbox costs and fees, so you can actually add value to them on that way. And then again, collaborate with them. You want them to accept payments the way you want to make them, and then optimize that portfolio, checks, transfers, ACH, corporate cards, how and why, and then visibility into AP and AR. That just facilitates the optimal timing of payments. We'll talk about that a bit more later. So in terms of AP automation, just really taking a really a general level here, just going from the checks, the electronic payments, just some survey data. Sometimes interesting if you got to make that business case. What are the benefits, cost savings, cash forecasting, fraud control, straight through processing again, and that really, and again, that gets back to lowering our invoice processing cost, working capital improvement. So all these things help build that business case. So you really have the ability in today's world of AP and my AP 3.0 to manage those supplier relationships, really mitigate those invoice costs, and then on the backside, optimize those payments methods. And then in mitigating the invoice costs, you're also helping maximize the productivity of all of those involved in the AP process. So you're avoiding those manual, you're avoiding people keying in things, you're avoiding manual intervention, you're avoiding disputes, and oftentimes you are avoiding a lot of journal entries as well on that side of it. So if you're able to use cards, you can eliminate a lot of journal entries as well. So the world of AP is actually changing dramatically just over the past few years, and the cost hurdle to really achieve the benefits of this AP 3.0 are pretty compelling. So in terms of, this is kind of a summary slide for me. I like to have print slides out every so often. So some of the strategic outcomes: eliminates payment of duplicate invoices, manual processes, and other systems can facilitate paying duplicate invoices. Again, we saw those earlier pain points. Eliminates suboptimal payment methods, allows us to take control of that portfolio, improves our supplier relationships, negotiating discounts, remove those manual errors, mitigates those fraud exposures, improves internal controls, and creates clear and detailed audit trails, allows employees to focus more on strategic activities, and this to me is tremendously valuable. The transparency and visibility really create a culture of continuous improvement, so you're able to really look at each key section of the accounts payable process, put some metrics there, always looking to improve that and get everyone to have that level of accountability. So let me go ahead, and I'd like to bring Ian in here. Ian, can you offer some color around the additional value that AP automation might offer companies that have international supplier in terms of engaging their suppliers?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the one thing, we talked briefly on the slide back about, first of all, some of the payment methods. And I think that's one thing that we've seen a lot of so-called disruptors in the settlement space that have come along that are finding new ways to exchange money. Peer-to-peer settlement methods where you're able to pay somebody into virtual foreign accounts as one way to do it. The other thing that we're seeing quite a bit of is more sophisticated systems that leverage domestic EFT or ACH things from international locations. So, for example, my supplier has a relationship in China, and they're able to use China's domestic ACH system to deliver funds much cheaper than sending, say, a SWIFT wire. The main thing, though, I think, whenever we talk about settlements, is obviously we want that combination of secure, fast, and inexpensive as the main elements with that. So, obviously, the more automated such a process is, like you say, the less things that can go wrong, and that simply makes tracking the money through the process a lot more efficient as well. In terms of international suppliers, obviously a big thing about automating your AP and having it all kind of clearly laid out in front of you is it allows you to make strategic decisions about when you enter the foreign exchange market. So if you've got a British pound invoice that's due in 2 weeks for 10,000 British pounds, and then another British pound invoice that's due 3 days later for another 10,000 British pounds, does it make sense to enter the foreign exchange market twice and do two separate transactions? Does it make sense to buy both amounts at that point in time and enter the foreign currency once for the large foreign exchange market, once for that larger amount? These are strategic decisions that you're able to make once you have kind of a more holistic view that is complete. So I think all those are kind of some side benefits when you're looking at it from an international perspective as well.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Ian. Really adds a lot of tremendous color to the conversation. So now we're going to switch. We started on the AP automation side, so we'll now talk about on the AR automation side. So we'll take a look at the order to cash process. So we'll go through the same process. We'll take a look at some of the accounts receivable pain points, and then we'll take a look at the technology out there that's really available to really help mitigate those pain points. And then I'll bring Ian into the conversation to talk about how some international exposures can really impact the value of automating accounts receivable. And then what we'll do is we'll go ahead and talk about how to marry AP and AR automation. And a great way to see the benefits to doing that is going to be for Ian to walk us through an example where some currency exposures exist. We'll really be able to see the tremendous value in aligning our AP and AR automation. So in terms of accounts receivable pain points, obviously at the top level, we have our delinquent invoices. And then in terms of the processing costs, right, the cost to receive the money, you can have inefficient invoice exchange. You're not exchanging things electronically. There can be misalignment on invoice terms. You can have suppliers taking ineligible discounts taken. We can receive inaccurate remittance information. Things can go in unnecessary credit holes. We can have blocking of valid orders on our side. So we just have collaboration hurdles. And then we have invalid customer claims and disputes. So all these represents, some of the pain points. So again, a big piece of this in some sense is in terms of the visibility, the symmetry of information that we have with our customers. And obviously the customer is king. And if you look at CFO research over the past few years, the top priority of CFOs and really driving growth is going to be tied to the quality of the customer relationships and making those relationships more valuable. So we have to remove any points of confrontation and consternation, but also we need to make sure that we are getting paid as well. So before I delve into the ways we address those pain points, go ahead and see where you're at in terms of AR automation. Again, it seems to me it's a little bit of a newer area. So I've seen this really come along in probably the past six to 12 months. Of course, I appreciate everyone's consideration in answering all of our polling questions here. And again, happy to take your questions in the questions area of your GoToWebinar control panel at any time during the webinar. I want to make sure you take advantage of the opportunity to tap in to the knowledge that Ian brings for us to the webinar. Has tremendous experience, really has his ear to the ground to some tremendously valuable insights. So I want to make sure you take the opportunity to tap in to those insights. So again, I'm going to go ahead and leave the webinar up for a couple more seconds. I'm going to close that. Then I'm going to go ahead and I am going to share the results. And then I'm going to give my little color commentary and then see if Ian has any initial thoughts. Let me go ahead and close that. And then I go ahead and share that. So again, we have the vast majority in the discovery phase, which is good, and the I don't know phase. So again, hopefully your discovery phase, this is motivating you to look deeper. And then those of you that don't know, it's really going to give you the motivation to see where your company is and then where some of the opportunities are going to lie. I'm pleasantly surprised to see that 24% of you are implementing or having that AP automation, AR automation solution coming away at your company. So I am thrilled to see that. So Ian, what are your thoughts here?
Sorry, was there a question in there, Ernie?
Yes. Do you have any thoughts for us on the results here?
Oh, well, yeah, sure. So in terms of, obviously the overall accounts receivable side of things, I think, again, it comes down to that same basic thing where the more that you can see holistically in one system, particularly when you're receiving monies from foreign locations and foreign currencies, is you want to have as quick a view of that money as possible. The ability to accept money, again, in local currency terms for a lot of a lot of people is a very key thing. So people obviously would prefer to get paid where possible in their own currency, but sometimes you have to accept payments in a foreign currency, and having an in-country account or method to receive that money in country really does speed up the process quite a bit, which is great, but you do need to have visibility of it also quite quickly as well. So again, a lot of these systems that we're looking at, kind of thing, really are about seeing money very quickly as it's received in real time, and again, knowing it's on the way and knowing that you can take an action around that. So obviously, incoming foreign currencies, a great source of exposure. Currencies can move up or down, and that can quickly eat into your margin. So the quicker you have a view of that currency, you can make that strategic decision. What do we need to do about this this foreign exposure item?
Great. Thank you very much, Ian, for your great insights. So let's take a look at kind of the AR automation and the new frontier, and what we're seeing more and more in terms of in the AR space is we're seeing some artificial intelligence. So some information about kind of it's kind of the forefront out there in terms of artificial intelligence. Some of the folks the High Radius is working on. So it's really about a cloud solution that really helps address those specific pain points. And so a lot of the manual processes that are going on facilitates the visibility, mitigates some of our exposures, but a lot of times it's really eliminating some of the disputes that are coming on. So in terms and looking at pain point in the credit area, there's efficiencies to be realized in credit flow, credit scoring. You're able to hook out some credit bureau investigations. So one of the things that the credit cloud piece of an application can do is it can identify high probabilities of an order being blocked. So we definitely want to mitigate that as well, especially if it's key customers. So we want to make sure that we are not blocking that order going out, which obviously will decrease our revenue. Make sure be proactive on that front. All of us at AR have been in this space, right? The deductions cloud, look at that workflow, see if those deductions are valid. So look at the claim and the backup and automate that. So it can actually look at the history of behaviors and identify invalid deductions with a high probability. So you can almost cut off at the pass. Company ABC is going to try and take an invalid deduction here. We want to cut that off at the pass. Want to make sure that maybe they've done this for 2 cycles in a row. Hey, you're going to miss this incentive here. This is not a valid deduction. Set up some rules, some alerts. Be proactive on that front. And then on the collection side, in terms of again delinquent payments or even getting paid at all. So some of the behaviors that could be studied out here can identify high probabilities of delinquent invoices. You can start to work with your customers proactively. So again, some of it's about communication. You can do notes, reminders. You can communicate up and down with your sales team. Engage a CFO as necessary. You can automate the correspondence, and then you can put in some specific strategies and rules to mitigate those delinquent invoices. So you can start to see where things go off the rail, maybe in terms of customers, maybe in terms of customer classes. And so what is the appropriate action that we have that's going to mitigate that and be to the case where our invoices are being paid on time and with the right deductions. And then in terms on the backside, a big pain point is in the cash application space, so that there's the ability to auto-correct exceptions based on user exception history. So there's several pieces of information and technology and then learning behaviors that help on that side as well. So altogether, what we're seeing, just like in accounts payable, we're seeing automation of manual tasks. As you notice across all the different what we might call clouds, there's collaboration tools. So there's internal collaboration tools, external collaboration tools. So we want to facilitate that communication and collaboration. That goes along with a point that Ian made in terms of AP automation. Allows you to standardize processes. You can get reporting and analytics as far as that hit rate, 95%, and then you can auto create deduction and capture that deduction information. And I think the key point here in terms of the technology. Again, I think it starts with the visibility, and it really, you really start to identify all the pain points, the manual pain points, the disputes, not only mitigating the disputes from happening in the first place, but really cutting those off at the pass and having some rules. If we go from here to here, okay, let's set that correspondence. Let's get this payment back on track, and let's all get on the same page. So I think this is an emerging area, and so I think we'll start to see more and more here. But it's really fascinating, and it's not. And if at the as you break it down to a level, it all makes sense. And even though it's called AI, it's really, if you just think about it in terms of learning those behaviors, and those of us who have been in AI, you have this information. It's kind of already in your head, right? And you're making these decisions based on instinct. And what a lot of this technology does, it allows you to facilitate data-driven decision making. So that's going to really mitigate a lot of those pain points that we have previously talked about. Absolutely. So in terms of the strategic outcome of AR automation, you can reduce bad debt in your DSO, frees up cash application resources to higher value activities, as we mentioned, such as collections and research. You can efficiency gains and cost savings. Again, we talked about clerical data collection tasks across AR. You can establish a proactive credit management process based on data, a data-driven decision making. You can eliminate a trade reduction backlog, and you can improve collection effectiveness by eliminating manual effort in the correspondences. And also you can really start to focus on your strategic accounts as well, identify and help and really focus on those strategic accounts as well. So at this point, I'd like to go ahead and bring in Ian. Can you give us your color in terms of the value of AR automation in the case where companies have these international exposures?
Sure. Yes. So again, I think the two main things in terms of the automation with the international exposures is the speed that about that payment that's due and coming in, so that you can make that informed decision around it. So again, I don't know what the value of the British pound is going to be 3 days from now, a week from now, whatever the case might be. I don't know when I'm going to get paid necessarily, but if somebody does pay me in a foreign currency, I want to quickly be able to make a decision around it. So again, a system that allows me to kind of take a look at that in real time or as close to real time as possible is what I'm looking for. And again, when that's integrated into in-country domestic settlement platforms and allows it to kind of work quickly that way, I think that's a great thing. When you've got all of your client collaboration happening across the same platform, again, I think that's a great thing. So not having to go looking for information about what's coming in and hoping that you're getting good information, but actually seeing it in real time and being able to quickly kind of match it against what it is that you were expecting to get paid as well. So all these things prevent people from making the wrong decision and help them to make the right decision. And with that, I just say that that's until we get to really the kind of combined AP AR integration. I think that kind of covers it all pretty nicely there.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Ian. And like you said, we'll get there shortly. So let's kind of let's give us a little visual representation here, and then I'll go ahead and hand the floor back over to you, Ian. So as I mentioned before, so we talked about historically we focused on the AR side of the house, and then we talked about how technology is really helping us focus on the AP side of the house. So now we've got technology is facilitating this visibility, communication in these systems to really allow us to really own this cash conversion cycle. As we know, these pieces are all interrelated. So now I'm going to hand the floor over to Ian to just really help us walk through the value in terms of being able to align the AP and AR automation space. Ian?
Great, thank you. So, I think the main thing when we're kind of thinking about our foreign currency exposures, as we're kind of thinking about our AP and AR, is a lot of times these can work kind of hand in hand together, kind of thing. And they typically do tend to be, all related to, even though they tend to be siloed depending on the company. So on the AP side, you've got the system where your AP is generated because you've ordered product perhaps from a foreign supplier. You're going to receive that product at some point in the future. You're going to then process your invoices, and then you're going to buy the euros that you're going to need to pay that supplier and issue your wire. So that's your AP kind of in its silo. It takes place over maybe a 60-day cycle. On your AR side, well, it's typically driven by an agreement to make a sale. And if that happens to be to another, foreign currency supplier, so in this case, I'm making a sale to a Canadian customer who's going to pay me in Canadian dollars, then I've entered into this agreement to make a sale, and I'm expecting to get paid in about 90 days. I'm going to produce my finished goods. I'm going to deliver those goods. I'm going to issue an invoice, and then on day 90, I'm going to get paid. Across that spectrum, we've got two very different things happening. So one where I'm going to receive the money, perhaps the very same money that I need to buy those euros and be able to issue my wire. And the other one is I've got the money that's coming, that I've got the money that I have to pay regardless to my supplier to keep in good standing. So when we kind of consider these things as just kind of two very simple things, it's fairly easy to keep track of it. In this case, I could make a couple of decisions. Well, I know 60 days from now, I'm going to need to buy some euros to issue my wire. I know what the exchange rate is on the euro now. I might choose to enter a contract to enter into a purchase today to buy euros 60 days from now and lock in my rate of exchange there. By the same token, depending on my situation on my AR side, I know that I'm going to get paid some Canadian dollars in 90 days. Again, I might want to make a strategic decision at this point to lock in a contract to make sure that when my Canadian dollars come in, that I'm getting the amount of US dollars that I expected for them. Don't want to see my margin get eroded by either my euro costs increasing or the value of the Canadian dollars that I'm receivable going down. So again, that's just kind of an essential, simple consideration that I think people are making fairly routinely. Where it gets more complex is a lot of times there's a lot of different things going on. So maybe you're buying product from Germany and you're also selling product into different parts of Europe. And all of a sudden your AP and AR start having a lot of different sides to the same currency pair. So on your AP side, you've got a sale that's saying, well, let's go ahead and buy some euros. And on your AR side, you've got a thing saying, well, I'm going to be needing to sell some euros. So if we can flip just to that next slide for a second, I think this is the one that communicates it. So what we want to be able to see ultimately is we want to be able to see what our net exposure is. And when it's our net exposure, what we really want to get at is if I owe currency in euros and if I have currency coming in euros and they happen to offset perfectly, then I don't need to enter the foreign currency market to buy those currencies, nor do I need to worry about taking any type of a defensive position to hedge against that currency risk. When I do have a currency exposure, well, I want to know what kind of a risk that I'm facing. So I want to be able to see if that Canadian dollar in the previous example, for example, does decline in value, what's that going to do to my U.S. bottom line? How is that going to impact me when I'm kind of trying to make my decisions in terms of what I should be doing in terms of my hedging decisions and things along those lines? And I want to be able to see all the outstanding hedging instruments that I have at once. So with a lot of the technology that's coming out now, the whole idea is to see things holistically, to see your AP, to see your AR, to see the contracts that you might have to hedge that risk that are already in place, so that these different siloed departments can kind of have a symmetrical look at things and make their decisions based on what the actual risk to the company is. And a lot of this is going to speak back to budget rates. So again, when you've got a budget rate specifically that you're working towards and you're saying, well, I need the currency, I need to make sure that I receive exactly this currency, then I want to be able to say, okay, this is my budget rate. And if my currency does fluctuate over a period of time, what is that impact going to be on my bottom line? So again, a big part of owning your cash conversion cycle is maximizing the value of your foreign currencies and minimizing as much as possible the unexpected spikes in value as you're making your foreign currency purchases. So a lot of the technology, that's being developed around this is simply to do that, to make sure that you're able to holistically track your foreign currency exposures across multiple currencies simultaneously, to make sure that everything that you need in terms of achieving your gains, your losses, maintaining your gains and losses is done all on that one platform. And again, having all your technology where you're able to pull in all of your payables, all of your receivables simultaneously, track the impact of exchange rate fluctuations, and then make your strategic decisions, whether to hedge your currency exposure or driving what type of actions you need to make, can all be made very, very, very much more simply at that point in time.
Okay, great. Can you speak a little bit to the, I mean, it looks like you can do some pretty interesting scenario planning based on when the rates change. Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it just kind of really ultimately does come down to just that. So you make an agreement. You sell something in U.S. dollars where you're going to get paid in U.S. dollars. You know exactly what you're going to get. When you have a lot of different moving parts in it, and then you're getting paid in an additional currency. Well, now you've got a situation where the impact of that currency fluctuation can cause gains or it can cause losses. So what we want to basically be able to do is say, okay, well, what type of tolerance does our company have for this type of a loss profile at this point in time? And you can model different scenarios in terms of where your break even is. You can model a lot of different scenarios around optimal margins and stuff like that you want to maintain. But ultimately, at the end of the day, whether it's simply a hedge and forget it type of a strategy, where you just want to basically lock in your profits now. You just want to again make sure that you're not duplicating any entries into the foreign exchange market that are necessary. So again, having that full holistic view of things and being able to take a look at your currency and then knowing what the impact is going to be on your company as it changes in value are all important inputs that drive treasurers' decisions on how they're going to manage that currency risk.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you very much, Ian, for your great insights there and taking us deeper into the alignment of the AP and AR automation. So I'm going to go ahead and offer some closing thoughts, then I'm going to go ahead and kick off our Q&A session. So please, I can still take your questions in the questions area of your GoToWebinar control panel. So just to kind of put a fine point on things, maximizing visibility in AP and AR and R-related cash flows is really empowering company to unlock the strategic value of owning their cash conversion cycles. If you look at it at the top level, it helps us maximize our relationships with both our suppliers and our customers, right? And do that kind of at the same time. And if there's trade-offs to be made, there's decisions to be made there, helps us mitigate the cost of processing payments, cost of receiving those payments, and also offers tremendous value in allowing us to more effectively manage and mitigate our financial and non-financial risk exposures. And breaking it down to AP and AR done right mitigates invoice processing costs. And then the two other legs of AP 3.0, improves supplier relationships, and then finally impacts productivity across the enterprise. And at the end of the day, AP can provide business intelligence for companies that empowers them to optimize how and when they pay suppliers. Payment suppliers is actually the third leg there, and tremendous value there in terms of cost and the relationship opportunities. AR automation done right minimizes bad debt, DSO, and improves customer engagement. And then, as we've talked about, in every world, but especially in the world where you're in international markets, whether you have suppliers or your customers there, alignment allows you to mitigate currency exposures, in addition to optimizing the benefits to automation in each of those areas. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the Q&A session, and I'm going to go ahead and direct my first question Ian's way. So Ian, can you speak a little bit about how companies are getting this this view? Is there data that's being passed back and forth between different systems, and how is that accomplished at a high level?
So could you repeat the question? Just cutting out a little bit there.
Oh, sure. So in terms of kind of getting that holistic view, can you speak to how data is pushed and pulled between the various systems to allow you to get the view of the information that you need?
Yeah, certainly. So, I mean, a lot of it can be done again, depending on the system and the usage. A lot of it can be done through peer-to-peer type communications that can be done across a collaboration center on the same application. So, for example, like I say, it is a system that can pull in from your existing systems, your existing Treasury platform. So you can pull in your AR, you can pull in your AP, you can use this common platform to communicate with the people that are in your supply chain, or the people that owe you money, or that you need to make payments to. So yeah, a lot of it can be pulled in that way, and then also managed again through an integrated peer-to-peer communication, electronic communication channel that's embedded in that same system.
Okay, so just a follow-up question on the communication piece, because I think this is really a game changer. Um, so, so do you have people communicating internally in the system and also communicating externally? And are there different views you can turn on so you can see different parties that communicate, or you can get a holistic view of those communications?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a big part of what, in terms of the collaboration center, what it is. The collaboration center type approach is that you are able to electronically, for example, push an invoice to your client across this platform with communications to an external party. Internally, again, different people can see different silo views and stuff like that as well. But again, it is really just a matter of of having it all kind of integrated into that one side, so that again, you can have that. But yeah, you can have it internal communications, external communications, again, all related to that same, a simple item that otherwise you'd have to use different techniques to communicate.
Okay, great. And someone's asking, so I asked a few questions around this. So, are there are there markets in 2018 specifically, current or end of 2017 and 18 specific currency markets where people might see more volatility, so they might want to pay a little bit more attention and realize the benefits of really aligning their exposures more effectively?
Well, it's always interesting when you look at currency markets, and certainly, historically, I think you would look at most of the developing or emerging economies as having more volatile currencies. However, this year, at least, a lot of the volatility has been actually seen more in the G10. So, in fact, strangely, the euro, the British pound, and the Canadian dollar have been some of the biggest movers this year against the U.S. dollar in terms of the currency markets. Again, historically, you'd look at emerging markets and say, if it's a bit more of a risky currency in that sense. Even currencies like the Chinese yuan, historically we've gone through periods where the value of the yuan was very stable and then moved very, very suddenly due to a government decision to revalue the currency. We've seen obviously other markets where you have concerns about the solvency of the currency altogether. So those are obviously huge decisions to make when entering those markets. You have currencies that are more difficult to hedge than others. That you also, when you're considering looking at those currencies, again, those tend to be mostly the emerging market currencies where there's not a whole lot of liquidity. But yeah, in terms of the currency markets, I mean, one of the main features is its excessive and unpredictable volatility. And whenever you look at a range of forecasts put out by financial institutions and large treasuries, the span between them tends to be, in terms of any single currency pair, sometimes a 20-cent difference between what somebody's forecasting for the high and the low for that same currency. So any currency can move excessively. Obviously, it's really just a matter of kind of looking at the trend that the currency is moving in, and trying to deduce from that if this is something that's likely to continue, and if you're exposed in it, to make sure that you get out ahead of that and deal with it appropriately.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Ian. In order to be mindful of our time, I'm going to go ahead and close our Q&A session. Again, if we didn't get to your questions, we'll reach out to you directly. Just wanted to offer you a note. There's some additional resources. So download the handouts. There are some hyperlinks there, some tremendously valuable piece of information. Specifically want to point you to the Western Union Business Solution Resources area. So I would encourage you to go ahead and take a look at what's available there. There's some great thought leadership pieces. So I'm going to go ahead and launch our final polling question here. Um, our last polling question is asking you to help us and identify what your most important strategic initiative here is in the arena of Treasury, and this helps us in determining the content that we have for our webinars going forward, making sure that we are hitting the mark with your professional development needs. As we wind down the polling question, I would like to once again thank our webinar sponsor, Western Union Business Solutions. We appreciate their strong commitment to thought leadership. Please note that you will have the opportunity to be connected with our speaker from Western Union Business Solution in the post-webinar survey. Just takes a few clicks of a mouse, and the survey is going to launch right after my final comments. Finally, thank you to the audience for your valuable time. We look forward to having you attend future Treasury Careers webinars. Thank you very much, everyone, and make the rest of your day great.